know that Star Trek is meant to depict a utopian view of the future, one where wars don't exist, money is an outdated concept, the whole goal of life is to just improve oneself. So let's talk about the first recurring disabled character to appear in the main cast of a Star Trek series. Geordi LaForge was the head of engineering in Star Trek The Next Generation. But did you know that Geordi was actually inspired by a fan? When The Next Gen was being made, the writers really wanted to ensure that it was going to be distinct from the original series so as not to be drawing too much comparison and to give the show a chance to kind of gain merit in its own right. Part of this distinctness was in trying to find new characters that weren't going to be direct clones of, say, a Spock or a Dr. McCoy. Before The Next Gen came into being, there was a fan of the show called George LaForge, and George was a quadriplegic who unfortunately passed away in 1975. He was the one that inspired the decision to include a disabled character into the franchise. Although George was quadriplegic, it was decided that a blind character would be what is easiest to incorporate into the show, which is how we end up with Geordi being blind and his visor, which is totally not just a headband over his eyes. It was screenwriter David Gerrold who actually suggested that they pay homage to George LaForge and name this character Geordi LaForge in respect to his passing, and Gene Roddenberry agreed and thought that this would be an apt tribute. In fact, this wasn't George's first time being immortalized in the Star Trek franchise. There was a character written with his exact name in the 1980 Star Trek novel The Galactic Whirlpool, written by the aforementioned David Gerrold. What I think is important to note here is that Geordi was more than his disability. It wasn't written as a weakness, and at times even Geordi himself directly referred to it as a strength.
And you don't resent it?
The visor or being blind?
Either.
No. Since they're both a part of me and I really like who I am, there's no reason for me to resent either one.
He was also accepted for this disability and wasn't treated any differently because of it. He was a skilled scientist and engineer who happened to have a disability. He wasn't a blind man who happened to be good at engineering. While I can't speak from a point of lived experience, I do think that this is a really wholesome inclusion, and I really admire the show for including disability in this utopian future and saying that, yes, sure, we've become so technologically advanced, but we haven't erased disability, we've just made accommodations for it as a society. That's good in my books.